What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Critical Overlord here. So this is going to be my spoiler-free review for The Black Phone. Now, this was such a good time. I saw the movie last night. I believe it comes out next week. 2022 just continues to be a great year for Ethan Hawke, who in this movie channels one of his most terrifying and unnerving and brilliant performances to date as the Grabber, who's the film's main villain. Now, I would say, and many others have stated this is considered like a sibling to Scott Derrickson's Sinister. The Black Phone centers around Finney Shaw, a kid that is abducted by a killer and locked away in his soundproof basement. When all hope seems lost, voices of dead victims start communicating to Finney through a black phone, and they are not going to let Finney die like they did. So Derrickson co-writes the screenplay with C. Robert Cargill, and I think these two collaborated on the screenplay for Sinister as well together. So a lot of this felt very inspired by Stephen King, and the script strengths are going to be found in this compelling sibling bond between Finney and his sister Gwen. They have a pretty rocky life at home with their, I would say, mildly abusive alcoholic father, but they stick together, and it's their interactions early on that reel you into being invested in this bond and recognize that they need each other. What this then allows is when Finney actually disappears, his disappearance and survival to the audience becomes more important, because you've already established early on that we should have a reason to care about these characters. They are very likable, and their bond, that sibling bond, is something that both siblings really seem to need in a life in which they have this father at home who really just seems to be disconnected. There is this I would say depression that lies in the household because of some other traumatic things that they've all had to deal with, the father included. So there's dashes of humor sprinkled into the screenplay, and that always works. Most of it's coming from Gwen, who I can see being a standout for a lot of people when they watch this movie. It has good themes for children about friendship and standing up to bullies, but the weakest part of this script, I would say for me, and maybe many others would agree, is that the Grabber can feel underdeveloped at times, and there are some slight inconsistencies within the screenplay itself, but that's with almost any movie, honestly. But despite the Grabber being underdeveloped, the mystery surrounding Hawke's character remains a driving force for why he's so scary. So even though the Grabber is underdeveloped, it works in favor of how effectively scary the character is. So Finney's arc is also the most intriguing. Most of the film is basically a look at a boy's journey to learning how to fight back when necessary. Admittedly, this subgenre of child horror has projects very similar to The Black Phone, so it's not necessarily breaking new ground or anything, but the execution is always everything, and The Black Phone, I would say, nails a home run. As far as like the supernatural element, we know is highlighted in the trailer. I found it easy to accept, but also found it kind of random, since most of this movie isn't supernatural. It's very much so grounded in a realistic story. So from what I recall, there's a plot point that may hint at where these supernatural abilities come from, more specifically talking about Gwen, who has like this clairvoyance to her, like Tangina from Poltergeist, and there's a plot point that kind of explains it, but it wasn't necessarily, I would say, all that necessary to have it so prevalent in the film. It was mostly just there to give her something to do once Finney got abducted. But performances here are breathtaking. Ethan Hawke again is getting talked about appropriately for all the right reasons, but these kids, Mason Thames and Madeline McGraw, they are very powerful in their roles, each shining during the humorous and frightening moments equally. Some of the visual aesthetic here will definitely be the biggest Sinister callbacks for a lot of people. You have like that Super 8 footage type effect that we know we saw in Sinister. A lot of the camera work helps establish Finney's feelings of hopelessness and despair while trapped in this basement, and also helps establish tension during some of his attempted escapes. And Scott Derrickson, what I also can say is, from not only the Super 8 stuff that will be a callback to Sinister, that aesthetic, and then also the haunting imagery of some of these old kid victims, again another Sinister callback. I can see certain people starting to pick up on certain styles of Scott Derrickson, because I actually went back and watched the original Doctor Strange. I hadn't realized that he did that movie, but then when I had rewatched it more recently to prepare for the Multiverse of Madness, I'm like, this is a Scott Derrickson movie. I just took a guess. His filmmaking style is starting to become something I can pinpoint, and I really like that. So each Again, each of the kids stars shine during the humorous and the frightening moments. A lot of great camera work is in the movie. While the Black Phone may have some predictable outcomes, that doesn't stop it from remaining gripping from start to finish, with constant reminders that perhaps you won't get the outcome you think you will, because it constantly keeps you on the edge of your seat. So the film doesn't jump into the terror right away. It has a good first half or so of just letting you grow attached to its characters before the danger kicks in. And this was genuinely just an effective horror movie all together, and I can't wait to see it again. As far as like the scares in it, like there's some jump scares in it. It is so nice to have a horror movie that has jump scares that genuinely feel earned. They're well placed, they're well timed. I'm not going to say you can't see them coming. It's just that still how it's done, it still, I can say was a very effective each time they happened, and it doesn't go overboard. None of the jump scares get to the point where it's just now a jump scare fest. This movie is very much so, while something that I would say is a child's worst nightmare, there's a lot that I could see a young horror fan discovering a movie like this. If they're going through a similar situation like Finney, if let's say this was the first horror movie they discovered, I could see this being a good introduction to horror movie for a certain individual, a certain young horror fan down the road when this movie becomes a cult classic, because I think it has the chance to become that. Ethan Hawke is he's that good in the role. The Grabber, again, while underdeveloped, I could see becoming an iconic character brought to life, even if it's just for the one time. So I can't wait to see more from Scott Derrickson. I can't wait to watch his movie again. I can't wait to see this sibling dynamic between Finney and Gwen on screen again as well. I do want to round this out by saying that Finney's arc and his growth throughout the movie, it is very just heartwarming to see by the time the movie runs out and he has this inner strength to now stand up for himself. It's all just so well done. And again, it has a lot of good messages for anyone going through something similar to Finney. To just learn when to stand up when necessary, learn when to be violent, because violence isn't always necessary, but there are certain instances where you have to fight back. I'm gonna honestly give this movie a 8 out of 10. I love The Black Phone. Can't wait to see it next week again when it comes out. If you haven't already, of course, make sure you subscribe, turn on post notifications, never miss a video. In the description I have links for social media accounts on my Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can message me there, of course. Let me know any movies and news or reviews you'd like me to cover in the future. And with all that in mind, guys, I will see you in the next video.